Welcome back to the D4 channel, and today we'll be continuing our book reading of Star Wars The High Republic Convergence. Now, if you haven't seen the Acolyte trailer, please, whether it's on the D4 channel or anywhere on YouTube, please watch that trailer, because that trailer is fire, and that is going to be the tail end of The High Republic. So I really want to catch up with the stories of the High Republic before that show comes out on June 4th. So in the next couple months, I'll be reading a lot of these books to catch up, and for you guys to catch up, if you guys don't have time to read or do any of that, you can listen to my beautiful voice here on the D4 channel. But before we get to reading, please like and subscribe to the D4 channel for all your Star Wars entertainment on this side of the YouTube galaxy. Please hit that like button and please comment. You know, we will respond to all your comments no matter what side of the force they are on. Hit the bell for notifications for every time we upload a video. And also, we do have a Spotify, so if you want to listen to our podcast in pure audio form, we have a Spotify, and I will leave the link to our Spotify in the comments below. This book reading will not be on Spotify because I'm afraid of copyright on Spotify, but YouTube seems to be okay with it, so you'll only get to hear these book readings on the YouTube channel. But without further ado, we are reading Chapter 5 of the Convergence. I'll be reading Chapter 5 and 6 today, so sit back, relax, put me on in the background, and enjoy. Chapter 5, Level 2623, Coruscant. If there was one certainty in Axel Greylark's life, it was that he could always bet on himself. Quite literally, deep in the back room of Rake's parlor, Axel was one of the 5 players hunched over a roulette wheel that the eponymous proprietor of the gambling den had created as a true game of chance. Illuminated by a low-hanging lamp, the chrome and gold pits spun, and each player tossed their cues into the fray. Axel kept his eyes trained on the shimmering carapace of his cue. He'd chosen the violet and emerald one because they were his family's colors, and since he was gambling with his family fortune, the correlation seemed apt. As the spinning slowed and each tiny sphere rattled into one of the 40 slots, several players threw up their hands in disgust and disappointment. Axel squeezed his trembling knee as his cue teetered on the rusty line between 2 diviats. He'd bet his last stacks of credits, plus the chit Rayek herself had backed him, on account of him being such a good regular and all. The cue finally tumbled into the golden jackpot. Axel blinked sleep-deprived eyes. He'd won. He'd finally won, and it had only taken. Axel glanced at his chrono. Damn it all to hell, had he really been here for 10 hours? One losing player smacked the lamp overhead, causing it to swing and strike the dealer. 2 hulking enforcers removed the poor loser, leaving those accusing Rick of fixing the games utterly silent. Axel eased back into his seat. His fingers had come away sticky from the armrest. He didn't want to know what the secretion was, but he was certain it hadn't come from him. Axel's droid QN1 nudged his pant leg below the table. Quinn beeped, something that sounded like disapproval of Axel's choices, then opened the triangular panel on its chest. It offered up a small silver flask, which Axel accepted with a gracious smile. He unscrewed the top and took a quick nip. Smoky whiskey burned pleasantly all the way down as he carefully watched the patrons of the gambling hall thin out. Some headed to find better fortunes in the rat-infested dens lining the pleasure district. Others might clean up and head to the upper levels for the start of the workday. Axel gave no sign of moving, and neither did the Milarian woman or a tipsy Rhodian who tapped a credit on the lip of the table. What? The Milarian woman sitting beside him all night asked. He rather liked the black diamond marks on her cheeks, and she'd rather like taking his credits until now. The cheap stuff's not good enough for you? The Rhodian chortled, and Axel drank again, a drop landing on his 1,000-thread count simmer-soaked tunic. How do you know this isn't the cheap stuff? He asked. Don't mind him, Rex spoke in her scratchy, whistling voice. Coruscant's little prince don't trust no one to pour him a drink. Isn't that right? Rex was an Utai with a wrinkled, pinched mouth that gave her the appearance of sucking on a sour drop. Her bulbous, protruding eyes were affixed on Axel as she slipped between the roulette and sabacc tables. She relieved the dealer and plucked into his seat. A pink drink appeared at her side from the many-armed bartender. Rick, darling, I mean no offense, Axel said, taking another sip of the Chandlerland whiskey, a gift from the senator's daughter on his last visit. but this was a very good year. And it was true. That batch was 1,000 credits a bottle, a tragic shipping accident that made it the rarest batch in the galaxy, with only 300 bottles left in existence. But what Axel Greylock wasn't saying was that he'd seen far too many people poisoned in his day to trust a drink from a dank hole in the wall in the steaming bowels of the city, even one as nice as Reich's parlor. "Why would I poison you, my best, most handsome customer?" Reich asked. The ring of her mouth took on the drink's tinge. "Besides, you owe me too much money. If anyone wants you dead, it's that Harris. What's her name?" The Millarn snapped her fingers. "Lady Lulu Furdaisy. Something ridiculous like that." Quinn bleeped what might pass for a chortle among droids. Axel shoved the flask back into his chest compartment. "Lady Lurin Faraday," he corrected. Even going down as far as the entrails of Coruscant wasn't enough to get away from the gossip of his very public split from the Chandlerlin Harris of Faraday Spirits, now shipping all over the galaxy. The only reason he remembered Faraday family business slogan was because it was the first thing Lou Ren had said to introduce herself, followed by her father's title of senator, and don't believe everything you watch in the hollows. Rex reset the roulette table and re-racked the selection of cues, so he didn't break up with her by standing her up at the spaceport. "No, that's right," he admitted. "There's just more to the story." Axel bit down on his back teeth and frowned at his warped reflection on the side of the lamp. The yellow overhead light made his complexion sallow and emphasized dark circles that hadn't been there 3 days before. His dark hair was rumpled and his eyes were blurry, but he had looked worse. In his pocket, his comlink buzzed. Likely his mother, again. He silenced it because he knew what she wanted. His mother wanted what everyone else did, an answer as to why he'd done what he'd done. Instead of making the decision to settle down, start to get serious, he'd taken his favorite speeder and a stack of credits and wound up at whatever gambling dead club or cantina would give him entry. He didn't need to explain himself. Why bother? The HoloNet, his friends, and his family had already made up their minds. The only place to hide from another one of his family's interventions was at Reich's, which is why he was determined to let his good luck take him as far as it would go, his talent for silencing any voice of doubt allowing him to ignore his calm. "Besides, you're all much better company," Axel said, never letting his smile falter. A lifetime of the very best schooling, from private tutors to the Royal Academy, had given him pretty manners. Reich ate it up. "And because you've been so good to me and extended me a chit to keep playing, I'd never leave you in the lurch. 'Cause you don't want to end up in a ditch," the Millarn woman murmured. He leaned forward on his elbow and grinned. "Darling, don't threaten me with a good time. Losing to you is not my idea of a good time," she purred, walking slender fingers across the top of his head. He angled himself slightly toward her. "But now things have turned. You sure you're not secretly a Jedi?" The sniveling orange Rodian honked a laugh. If he was a Jedi, he wouldn't be losing all day and night. A cold, ugly sensation spread from the apex of Axel's chest. He brushed her slender green fingers away, his voice like flint as he said, "Don't insult me, darling." Confused, the Millarn backed off and snatched a drink off a passing service droid's tray. She knocked it back. "Are we going to flirt all night, or are we going to play?" asked the Rodian. "You've had enough, friend. Buy-in's a lot more than that," Rick said benevolently. The Rodian got up abruptly, muttering in the language Axel barely understood from accompanying his parents on ambassadorial visits to the swamp world. Something about his husband killing him. Whatever it was, the Rodian was out. The Millarn stacked her winnings into neat towers. The two of them had been trading the same credits back and forth for hours. "You keep having your fun, little prince. The rest of us must go earn our fortunes." She raised her hand to caress her face, but he leaned away. What bores? He wasn't going to let her or anyone ruin his new streak. He sat up and reached for the tray of cues. "You too," Rick nodded, gesturing at him. "Go home, Greylark. I already run the risk of angering your mother." "Leave my mother out of this," Axel said, a harsh edge clipping his voice, one he did his best to keep buried. Quinn hovered into the air, the droid's triangle chest panel backlit with pulsing red light, as happened when Axel's temper flared. Stranglers in the den turned to glare at him, to see if he'd cause a scene. If he'd joined the unfortunate moof milkers tossed out into the gutter outside, he couldn't help but feel he'd done the very thing Rake had wanted him to do. Let himself be baited. Because of his mother, the Admiral, glorious, magnanimous Chancellor Greylark, he had been denied entry into most of the clubs on every other level, but not here. This was a place where he could have fun, forget. Buried so deep in the belly of Coruscant, in a place that smelled like acid sewers and musty recycled air, a place of shadows where he didn't have to be Axel Greylark, son of the most important woman in the galaxy. He'd just be his wretched self. Come on, Rick, darling, Axel said, resting his arms behind his head. After all we've been through, you who would give refuge to many, who would deny me one more parlor game? Ah, but I give refuge to those victims of your mother's policies, Rex said, then glanced around the quiet room, the band at the center of the room merely stretching aching fingers and tentacles. Who told you to stop playing? Never stop playing. Is that understood? The band kicked into a cover of eerily popular Your Love Sends Me to Level 9. Axel smiled at the Utah, his best Greylark smile. One more, please. When she made no show of moving, a tightness wrapped around his chest at the thought of stepping out those doors with nothing to show but a few hundred credits. He'd already lost so much. His accounts had been frozen, and he was certain the chance of security detail was searching for him. He could go home, explain himself to his mother, issue a statement, and perform an act of community service as a penance for his behaviors. Or he could stay because his luck had finally turned on that last hand. And what are you going to bet with? Ray grinned as she played with the house stacks of chips. Axel undid the sash of his cape and folded it neatly onto the pile. The simmer silk count alone is worth 700. Keep your garments, Rick sneered. I want something precious, something the galaxy covets from you. Axel tried not to grimace. The price of his upbringing was that he'd been on the holofeed since the day he was born. Despite his penchant for getting into trouble, he was coveted as one of the galaxy's most eligible bachelors. You flatter me, Axel said, and Quinn gave a warning beep. If you win this round, I will clear your debt with me. Axel did his best to keep the thrill of that possibility from showing on his face. He glanced at the wall of trophies behind the bar, then the tank where Rick housed neon carnivorous pariahs that were all mandibles and tiny fins. He cleared his throat. And if I lose? All I want is a lock of your hair from your pretty head. Axel's bloodshot eyes traced the wall of trophies proudly displayed behind the bar. The horns of a Deveronian male, an upper row of teeth from a Cargordian, preserved Togruta Montrose encased in glass, the shriveled hands of unfortunate thieves and cheats. Rumors were that she'd been exiled from her clan and from Yutapau itself because of her affinity for such vicious trophies. She ended up on Coruscant running the tables for the Romero cartel until they set her up with her own gambling den in exchange for their protection fee and information. Axel threaded his fingers through the thick black strands of his hair. His hair grew back. His debt to Rick would keep growing too. QN1 made a deflating beep boop sound Axel knew quite well. It was his droid's way of telling him to go home. What say you, little prince? Rick ran her fingers across the box containing the cues. Strange, tiny reptiles that some believed had evolved in the gutters of Coruscant from rats and lizards. When light hit them, they curled into compact little balls no bigger than a roulette cue. Axel picked up his lucky purple cue and brought it into the shadows of the den. The critter unspooled, its pointed face and beady eyes moving in the air. Axel snagged a piece of the rind from a discarded drink on the table and let the ugly little beastie feast. A tempting offer, Axel said, deliberating on the odds. Reich's roulette was a true game of chance, not skill. There were 40 slots, 37 numbers, 1 golden jackpot, and 2 black house slots. He'd alternated his bets, inside, outside, doubles, and triples across evens and odds. Sometimes when he was reckless and bold, he bet on a single number, 18. Now he had one shot. For Axel, possibility itself was like an electric charge. The sleepless aches, the bloodshot eyes, the worries of his uncertain future, it all zapped away, and there was nothing but the thrill of chance. He stacked his remaining credits across 4 numbers for a split bet, 2 odds, 2 evens, 1 include 18 naturally. What are we waiting for? He flashed a smile at Reich, who returned it, revealing tiny yellow teeth. Axel moved his palm into the light, and his cue clamped up, its shimmering violet and emerald carapace ready to roll. Reg's parlor, nearly empty, had attracted the remaining patrons to their table. QN1 never wanted to be left behind, hovered at Axel's shoulder. He tapped his droid's domed head for luck. Such pretty hair, Rake said, and set the roulette to spin. Axel let his cue drop with a turn of his palm. Rake's red house cue bounced as the gold and chrome pit, world blurring the metal and numbers as it picked up speed. The Utah woman seemed unusually calm, like she knew something. Axel didn't, like she'd already foreseen the outcome. For a fleeting moment, as the roulette slowed and the cues bounced from black to chrome to gold, Axel racked his hair back. He could hear his mother's voice, soft, low, and defeated. Oh, Axel. He'd deal with the inevitable confrontation when it came. For now, he had a game to win and a ledger of debt to clear. Come on, he whispered, the creak of the table, the rattle of the carapace reverberating, his cue bouncing from slot to slot, edging so close, so very close to the jackpot gold. Come on, come on. The roulette stopped completely. Rake's cue rattled into the double zero belonging to the house, while his landed one fraction to the left of the jackpot and away from any number he'd bet. There was a winded sigh from everyone around him, like they all felt the gut punch of his loss. Rake chuckled, reaching to hoard the credits on the board toward her bosom. Don't worry, I'll... Then his iridescent cue, his lucky, strange little critter mutated in the gutter, did something impossible. It made a tiny gurgling sound and bounced into the jackpot as the wheel gave a final nudge. I won! He said it so he could believe it himself, and then he said it again with his unusual confidence. I won. A cheer went up around him, hands pounding his back. Quinn headbutted his thigh in victory, its front panel pulsing an array of colors. You deserve a name, Axel said, cupping the creatures between his palms. It unfurled enough to waggle beady eyes. That didn't count, Rax snarled. You tampered with the cues. I did no such thing. Axel fed his cue, the pith from a discarded cocktail fruit, then stood. His thighs ached from disuse. He needed to get to the bathhouse and get the crick in his lower back worked out. Don't be a sore loser. A thick, grubby hand wrenched the violet cue from his grip. The critter made a whistling cry, then was silenced by the crunch of Rake's teeth. Axel was still staring at the Utah, masticating on the creature that had helped him win, when all at once there were hands on him. He groaned as his face was shoved onto a sabacc table. QN1 whirled and flew to his side. Axel threw his arms back, but pain wrenched up his forearm as he was pinned harder. All he could see was Reich's slimy teeth and Quinn crashing hard to the floor. This is between you and me, Reich. No one touched his droid. No one. The Utah approached, large golden eyes with dark blinking slits narrowed on him. He wanted to gag from the whiff of her breath. The last person who insulted me, I fed to my pariahs. Axel heard the knife before he saw it, the soft clang of metal being unsheathed. Sticky hands fisted around a lock of his hair and yanked. He tried to pry his pinned arm toward his attacker's holster blaster. He'd get out of this. He always got out of this. You know, I usually expect a nice dinner before getting in this predicament, he said. Always so glib, Rex said. Perhaps I'll send a second lock to your mommy. I'm sure she'll frame it. Axel wheezed as the pressure doubled against his back and his arm felt like it was going to be wrenched off his shoulder. Enough fear worked its way through to him that he felt cold from the inside. He shouted and tried to wrestle out of the grip, but there were too many of them, and the cold kiss of metal pressed against his hairline. He should have listened to QN1's wording, but he'd been greedy, and if he was honest, he simply hadn't wanted to go home, to the tower above the world, to the empty halls. This was the ultimate price to pay to feed the nightmares he couldn't quite shake. Wait, Axel shouted, his voice ragged. I'll make you a new deal. You have no credits. Even the Chancellor won't bail you out. What do you have to offer me when I could take what I am owed? Axel saw the blinking red light of his droid, which was slowly getting back up. The Chancellor herself would owe you a favor. That's got to be worth more than a bit of my hair, doesn't it? Your mother doesn't rule alone, and she isn't here to speak for herself. Right, but I just need your attention a little longer. Now, Q, what are you waiting for? Quinn flew out of Axel's view, but he heard the electric shock that felled Rick and her enforcer. The droid bounced in a short-lived victory. As Axel picked himself up along with the remains of his dignity, he was faced with three figures, a muscular Twi'lek, a hulking human, and a Hask that screeched loud enough to scatter everyone except the band, who kept playing under Reich's early command. Looks like we've overstayed our welcome, Quinn. The little droid made a sound that likely translated to I told you that hours ago. I know. Axel raised one palm to stop the trio, ready to smash him into smaller pieces that would likely go on Reich's wall of trophies. Wait, let's just settle this like old friends. Have a drink with me. The three of them glanced at one another in confusion, and for a wild moment seemed to consider it. Axel gestured to his droid. All night, everyone had seen Axel reach into the droid's panel for his flask. Quinn's senses blinked red as Axel retrieved not his Ray whiskey, but a silver blaster. Axel only got one moment of surprise, and he took it. He shot the biggest of the three in the thigh, then knocked over the sabacc table. He dropped himself against it, turning to Quinn, its front panel still blinking as disapproving red. It worded a suggestion. No, I'll take the Twi'lek. You take the ugly, hairy one. Queen bipped. As he prepared to attack, blaster fire was returned. Glass crashed around them, but the band played on, only missing a few notes before the music died. No screams, no blasters, no shouting. Patrons, a grunt came from Reek, who was slowly rousing from her shock. See, he said, even though he knew something was wrong, they're no match for us. QN1 made a deflating sound, then peeked over the edge of their cover, trilling in response. What do you mean backup is here? Axel shot to his feet, blaster pistols leveled, and came face to face with a troop of Coruscant guards. He blinked, relieved. Axel holstered his pistol and offered his most charming smile. Thank goodness you're here. I've been looking all over for you. Sorry, sir, one guard said, raising his blaster. Chancellor Greylock's orders. No, wait. The last thing Axel Greylock saw was the ring of blue light. And that was the end of Chapter 5. Axel Greylock sure sounds like scum. A little bit of Han Solo, but like a more rich, entitled type of Han Solo. Now we are in Chapter 6, Erasmus, capital city of Iram. Ziri couldn't be here, not on Iram, not on this pier, and not with this stranger, even if he had rescued her. She rubbed her chapped lips together, her tongue aching from water, even if the salt would make her sick. Please, he said, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. Salt water clung to his soft brown curls and to the heavy lashes that fringed wide, steady green eyes. If I wanted to hurt you, why would I have saved you from drowning? Ziri took a step back, but did not lower her bane blade. The sun was bright on Irano, but here on Iram it was different, refracted against the mottled blues and greens of the sea. Light gave the effect of a dream, though the situation felt like a nightmare. Breathing heavily, her throat burned with the ocean she'd swallowed. She hadn't screamed as she lost control of her starfighter when the explosion of Blitz's ship had sent her careening into Iram's atmosphere. Her fear had never been of falling, it was worse than that. She'd been afraid of the encroaching sea, the same waters that had stolen her brother from her. At the sound of heavy boots, Ziri leveled her blade at the approaching guards. 8 of them. From what she studied of Iram, the brocaded vests and slashes designated them of the palace. His retinue, then. She made a terrible sound, half laughter, half whimper, as she took several steps back to the edge of the pier. Why let me drown when you could have a prisoner? His lips twisted with frustration as he stood, glancing back at the retinue of guards flanking him, raising thin staffs, threads of electricity crackling around the metal ends. Ziri used to dream about moments like this, strategize about what she would do, how she would fight in the event she was captured. She could not let herself become a prize of war dangled over her father. She was born of Irano, a child of the Thalfire Scorpion, the creature that survived in the scalding heat of the desert. When she came of age, she was dropped into the canyons that would devour lesser beings with nothing but her bane blade. And she found her way back home. Her abilities as a warrior were not in question. She could shove the unarmed man aside, tackle the biggest of the guards, then use his electrostaff on the others. She'd plow through 2, perhaps 3, before she could make a run for it. Her heart thundered at the idea of being lost in the maze of the city streets. And then what? If she got out of Erasmus, would someone give her shelter while she wore the uniform of their enemy? Would she have done the same if it was Iram's prince at her door? That's when she looked up and saw the people peeking out from their windows, was hit with the stench of dried seaweed and waste. Noticed the tents lining the lower level of the slum, gaunt faces, hungry faces, without the strange sea green eyes and freckles of most of Irami. She might be looking at her own people. Ziri bit down on the side of her lip. She needed pain to focus on what she had to do, a numbing calm spreading through her limbs. She stopped shaking as the resolve set in. Iram did not take prisoners because any warrior of Irano would rather take a dagger to the heart than be a captive. She looked down at her bane blade, a gift from her brother when she'd been sent into the desert for her rite of passage. The hilt was dotted with rubies. Like your hair, he told her. She turned her blade on herself. A hard jab through her solar plexus would require her total resolve. Please, begged the stranger who'd saved her. He took one step forward, his voice like an anchor. Please don't. Indecision sliced through her. She turned her face to the sky. The shadow of the timekeeper moon and her homeworld were there. She briefly shut her eyes and hoped Lieutenant Sugru had managed to salvage the hull. Please, the stranger said again. It was a softness in the word that made her look at him differently. Who was he? Dressed like a royal in a slum like this? I won't let anyone harm you, I swear it. What good is your word? She blinked, taking the fine linen fiber of his open vest, the gold pendant resting over the bare skin of his torso. She recognized the sigil of the queen's household. Then do not take me by my words, take me by my actions. He raised a stern hand toward the encroaching guards. Stand down, Vigo. But, my lord, stand down. He did not spare the guard another moment before returning his attention to her, one arm still outstretched like a lifeline. You're Captain Alberon. Jiri squared her shoulders. You know my name? I demand to know yours. The corner of his lip twitched. Did he think she was funny? I'm Fan-Tu Zen. Now you can either go with them to a holding cell, or you can come with me for an audience with the queen. And who are you to the queen? When he frowned, he looked boyish, though she guessed they were the same age. Well, she is my mother. So this was Queen Adrela's adopted heir. It's a trick, Vice Pharaoh's voice echoed in her ear. Is that all you've got, Lieutenant Suguru, the man who had taught her everything she knew? Your brother would have known what to do. Her father's voice then. Her father. There had been a moment as she was falling into Iram, when Jiri had wondered not about her own survival, but about the way her father would retaliate. He doubled down on the war after Nico's death, even though no evidence ever existed that proved it was anything but a tragic accident. If the monarch lost his last living heir to the enemy, everything Jiri would have fought for and everything she wanted to do would end with her. She'd be nothing but a memory, a cause, a vicious cycle. What would the monarch do if Jiri drove the blade through her heart? The answer came in a cold realization. She realized every battle she'd fought in a fury of memories. She imagined drill ships raining merciless destruction on these people. Without her, all he'd have left would be his poisonous counsel. Jiri had to stay alive, captured or not. General Lau had been willing to listen, but she didn't know if he'd survive the fall. No, Jiri was alone, and she had to trust this stranger. For Irano. Then Jiri Alberon tossed the dagger up in the air, catching it by his metal tip. She offered him the hilt. It was the highest gesture of trust from an Irani warrior she could give. He removed the thin gold chain from around his neck, the pendant spinning between them like the eye of fortune. She didn't soften, but snatched his offering at the same time as he took hers. The princess of Irano put one foot in front of the other and began the winding road into the heart of Iram's capital. And that is the end of chapter 6. When we come back, I will be reading chapters 7 through 9 of Convergence. So thank you guys for listening. And again, if you enjoyed this book reading, please give us a like on the video. And as always, like and subscribe to the D4 channel for all your Star Wars entertainment fun on this side of the YouTube galaxy. And please comment, let me know what you guys thought of the 2 chapters and the book in general. And as always, from me and my counterpart, may the Force be with you, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.